Emotional, spiritual, and physical wellness is the destination, well, we all strive towards, but there are many paths to get to that destination, including those less traveled. Learn more about alternative paths to well-being next on Speak Your Mind. Welcome to Speak Your Mind. I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps, licensed psychologist with the Human Development Center. Are you happy and content with your life today? And what do you do when you're not so happy and content? We talk a lot about traditional approaches to life's normal ups and downs and to mental illness, but that's a pretty small box, and we human beings are not a one-size-fits-all species. So tonight, I've invited some non-traditional healers and teachers to help us think outside of that pretty small box, and we're thinking outside that small box tonight about well-being. You can be a part of tonight's conversation by calling the numbers on your screen right now locally. Dial 218-788-2844 or call toll-free at 1-877-307-8762. We'll be answering your questions throughout tonight's show. Now, I'm going to introduce my very special guest. Dr. Sarah Seidelman is a fourth-generation physician turned shamanic healer, life coach, and author of What the Walrus Knows and Born to Freak. And Deborah Adele is the author of the Yamas and Niyamas, Exploring Yoga's Ethical Practice. Currently, she travels around the country sharing yoga's principles for greater happiness and well-being. Thanks to both of you for being here. And I want to share with the audience that I meant to leave the house with all three of the books because I have all of the books and they're all available. I know you can get them on Amazon, and after you hear both of them speak, if you haven't heard them speak before, you're going to want out and get those. You're going to want to run out and get those books or go to your computer and order them because all three of them have important things to say, and you're not going to want to miss out on that. Now, we started by saying that we're going to think outside of the box, and I know that there is some Norwegian bachelor farmer out there who's turned on the show and said, what is with the shamanic healing? What even is shamanic healing? That's almost probably as far out of the box as we could get for that Norwegian bachelor farmer.
Yes.
Yes. So maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, so I come from a background of traditional allopathic medicine, but what shamanic healing is essentially working with loving and compassionate spirits to restore balance to an individual, or also can be to restore balance to a community. And oftentimes we're either removing something that doesn't belong in that person's sort of spirit, or we are putting back or restoring something that's been lost. One of the concepts which is pretty prevalent in shamanic healing is soul loss. And the concept being that when we're conceived, we sort of have this whole soul. It's a perfect ball of golden light, you might imagine. And over time in our lives, you know, all of us experience different traumas. Maybe we've been in a car accident. Maybe we witnessed something violent and frightening, or it can be even smaller things that we're not even aware of that have been frightening to us. And we lose a little small part of ourselves. And when that happens repeatedly over time, sometimes we lose enough of our soul that we become kind of disempowered. And people can feeling depressed, or feeling, I'll sometimes hear people say, you know, ever since this certain situation happened, I don't feel like myself anymore.
Or I don't even know who I am anymore.
Or I don't know who I am. Yeah, that kind of thing. And sometimes you can trace it back to one event, or sometimes it's been, again, a series of things that's happened. And so the shamanic healer's job is to, in that case, if soul loss is the problem, is to restore, bring those soul parts back. And that's a rather mysterious process, but working with loving and compassionate spirits, again, which might be a pretty strange idea to a Norwegian bachelor farmer. But his relatives in Norway might have been, you know, the Sami people had a very strong shamanic tradition. So ironically, you know, in Norway, there was probably a lot of shamanic work going on. But so bringing those soul parts back to people, they often come back symbolically, maybe as a flower or as a certain kind of tree, with a particular kind of strength that they have lost. So maybe it's their trust that it's safe to be who they really are, or trust in new beginnings. It can be something like that. And it's a pretty vast practice, but that's one of the things that shamanic healing can do.
So that to me also just sounds like that courage to reclaim your natural spirit, and that idea maybe, and then you tell me if if I'm on the wrong path of the alternative path here, that we're born with everything we need. And then when we start losing that is how we also start losing this sense of self that we have.
Yes, definitely. And it's sort of the concept that, in a sense, there's a part of us at all the time that's completely healed and whole, but this process brings us there, helps us to make that more, I guess, conscious, so we become aware that we have these parts of ourselves. So we really can start to, the idea is that when you're full of power, in shamanism we say, you want to walk on the earth full of power. And when you're full of power, you can do the things that you say you want to, you can do the things that you came here to do and be effective as a human, kind of.
And your roots, as I know them, have been sort of in the yoga world, and I think, yoga has become, to me, when I feel like there's sort of a faddish part to it now. There's a studio around every corner. It's the new thing to, they have yoga clothing, and the yoga clothing and the yoga mat and the yoga block, and now I need a yoga bag to put in my yoga mat. Somebody in my office referred to yoga as fancy stretching, but I kind of feel like that's really shortchanging and not exactly exemplifying what yoga is. And so tell us how your understanding of yoga and how that fits into the concept of well-being.
If we look at yoga the way it comes to us from India and from ancient times, it's really this sense of empowerment, but it's done by pulling all the pieces of ourselves back from this thinking that we have to suffer, of being so dependent on outside events and people to make us happy. So at the core of yoga sits this same concept you were both speaking of, is that I have everything I need. It's all inside me. And I give these pieces away by needing the sun to shine when I have a family reunion planned, or needing to have a certain level of retirement to feel safe, or needing enough people to think I'm cool and I did a good job tonight, or whatever. And so I outsource my own sense of happiness, my own sense of well-being, and it's a losing battle when I'm that dependent on the external world. And so yoga, the practice, the discipline of yoga, is really pulling the pieces of myself and my well-being back here into me, and really spending time internalizing all that is available to me. And it then becomes a different lens at which to look at the world. And instead of needing things from the outside world, how do I serve from this joy, from this well-being? And so from the very sense of wellness, this sense of empowerment and of creativity, of well-being, of even keeledness in life, while it's doing this, its ability to stay here, to me is outside the box of wellness, the sense that, or how we understand wellness, because we don't have to suffer. We really don't have to suffer. That's one of those key ideas in yoga that stops me in my tracks.
I think, one of the things that both of you just mentioned, whether or not you were, the degree to which you both realize you mentioned it, is that I think often people think of, this concept of alternative pathways to well-being as alternative equals new age. And what both of you just very clearly said is this is going back to ancient ways. Both of what you do goes back to ancient ways, and it's reconnecting with the ancient ways and ancient thoughts, I think, maybe, of how we can come to a place of well-being and what it means to be human then.
That's such a good point, Carolyn. And I think when we put our time and follow a discipline that we really believe works, that to be able to look back and see it's tried and true over all these years, that it's been proven to actually be effective. And that's really important.
What do you see as what is your experience in, because both of you have worked with people and either in teaching or in sort of specific individual interactions, as the barriers to people people either put up themselves or feel that are put in front of them in terms of getting to that place of well-being?
Well, I was just thinking, I was going to say just connecting with some of these shamanic ideas I think are so unusual. So sometimes that can be kind of a barrier at first where people are like, well, this is odd to me or strange. And so that can be kind of a problem. But oftentimes I find that they connect with these really quickly once we get started, because these are ancient concepts, just the way yoga's been around for, tens of thousands of years, as has shamanic work. So I think some of the barriers are, we've been told that, for example, our health is the job of our physicians to keep us well. And I think that part of what's happening right now in our culture is that people are taking back their own responsibility for their health and well-being, which I think is exciting. And I think that we need medicine, we need allopathic medicine, all of its amazing advances and all the incredible care providers that are doing that work. But if we don't attend to our own spirit or our own personal sense of power and regain that and see how much power we can have, then we're sort of, again, like in a losing battle, as Deb mentioned. If we give all our power away to whatever, the weather, the food we're eating, whatever it is.
So one of the things that you mentioned and that has already becoming sort of a theme of tonight is that in order to have a sense of well-being, you have to have a sense of your own personal power. And that when you have lost that sense of your personal power, you have in essence lost your center in your voice. Is that a fair thing for me to say?
Very well said, yes.
Mm-hmm.
What's been your experience about also what else you've noticed about the obstacles that we kind of put in our own way, or how we get in our own way, maybe, in terms of having a sense of well-being?
I think often we forget that our innate nature is joy, and we forget that we're so unique, each of us. We're so unique. We came here to bud like a rose or like a tulip or whoever we are. And to the degree that we live the lives we think other people want us to live, or we live the lives that we think we should, and forget that there has never been anyone like us. There will never be anyone like us ever again. So how do I really fully walk into who I am? And that is so exciting. It's just, I can feel the life pulsing through me when I think about that. There's a text in yoga, it's a beloved text, where Krishna is teaching Arjuna how to live. And it's a little text because these were passed on orally, so that each word is so important. And twice this teacher says to the student, it's better to make a mess of your own life than to live someone else's really well. And I think to give ourselves that permission to try out these things with ourselves, that we aren't really ever stuck, that one thing can lead to the next, and it's always this creative force in us asking us to grow and become more and more who we are.
I love the sense of having permission to make a mess. Because I feel like I make a mess really well, and that I could teach make a mess lessons. To me, that when you said that, I just felt a sense of freedom about that. And I know that my own tendencies are to get a little on the perfectionistic side,
Yes.
and I think that my own journey has been about learning how to let that go. And the older I get, I feel like that's more exciting to let that go. Mm-hmm. And so when I hear statements like that, I just feel such a freedom in that permission to not be perfect. And how do you see, and how does that sense of perfectionism, where does that come into play with shamanic healing?
Well, I was thinking what, Deb was talking about, kind of, really being more of who you are. And one of the things that's a tenet of shamanism is that, we are all connected to an animal spirit, or a spirit animal, and a lot of people throw that term around lightly, but it's really a powerful idea. And I think connecting with an animal spirit, you sort of begin to own your own instinctual way of being that's best for you, even though maybe society says, you should be going out, or you should be doing this, or you should be maybe being living a very external life. But maybe your animal that is connected with you is, say, like a jungle cat who really likes to spend a lot of time alone, in quiet, in solitude. And what I find is sometimes when people connect with who their spirit animal is, they begin to live their life. One of my spirit animals that I work with is an elephant, and elephants are inherently very messy. I mean, if you ever watch them in nature, they're quite destructive. They will, trying to get the marula fruit off the tree, they will make a big mess, but they often get what they're looking for. Yeah, they're not delicate, right? And they're very emotional, and those were things that kind of helped me to accept my own self. That I was a sensitive and emotional person, and that I could be messy sometimes, and that was okay. I could clean it up too.
Here's a question for both of you, and it's talking about kind of this concept of resilience. Mm-hmm. And if you are a naturally resilient person, would a natural resilient person benefit either from shamanic instruction or the type of yoga that you described? And so I'll let each of you answer that question. So we'll start with you, Deborah. Of just because you have resilience, or resilient, that you've shown resilience in some situations, can you benefit from yoga?
I actually think it's my yoga practice that has given me my resilience, and that just continues to grow. It's a gift of the practice, and it's a gift of that inward focus, that discipline of spirit, really, of spending time with however we understand that deeper part of us, that greater part of the universe. And the more that we do that, we tap into things that are greater than we are, loving arms that hold this universe somehow beyond our concepts, and that in itself creates a resiliency, that practice. But yet the physical work of yoga, the mental work of yoga, the spiritual disciplines of yoga, all create resilience. Yeah, I think that's the purpose of a spiritual practice.
And I would say, I think that it is a myth that people are either born resilient or not born resilient. Yes. That resilient comes from a practice, and whether you're aware of that, and maybe you've shown resilience in some situations where it doesn't feel like it was much of a practice for you, that sooner or later you will face challenges in your life, and why would you not want to have easier access to that? That it doesn't have to be like, I'm just not, like, that person can do that, I've never been able to do that, and it's like, well, it's about maybe developing a practice then.
It really is the grace of the practice, I think, resiliency. It's a gift, it's a fruit.
And in shamanism, I think a lot of people are drawn to it when they are in crisis, or suddenly their life maybe has worked for a long time in a linear, logical way, and no longer it does, so they seek it out. And I would say it's definitely, that it is a fruit of doing the work. But what's really wonderful about shamanic practices, you learn how to journey, which is sort of altering your consciousness, going into a deeply meditative state, I guess I would call it, which is healing and restorative in and of itself. So there have been scientific studies showing people's, their immunity increases during that time, your blood pressure goes down. So it's deeply sort of a restorative practice to do just that. But you can also ask questions. You can go and ask for healing. Once you connect up with your own loving and compassionate spirits, you can ask for helpful information for problems you're facing, and get really amazing, helpful information. At least that's been my experience. So it's made my life on all levels. Any questions I have about parenting, about my marriage, about my work, all those things, I find really amazing, loving, compassionate answers that put me at ease in my life.
And I think, one of the things that you mentioned that we sort of want to underline is that the research really has shown that meditation is as good a predictor of longevity as your smoking status or your obesity level status. And so, you know, if you're a hard science person and you need hard science to be convinced, they've done the science now showing the effects of meditation and that sort of that inward journey, right? Learning how to journey inward, not just learning how to journey outward. What would you say? You know, I liked what you said, Sarah, about people often look to new things when they're in crisis. And what would you say the benefits of a crisis can be in terms of well-being?
Well, I was just thinking in my own life, you know, I came to a point where I was just no longer felt comfortable where I was in my job, and I was feeling I was supposed to be doing something else, but I wasn't sure what that was, and it was very confusing and befuddling. And so when I learned how to journey and when I connected with my first spirit animal, and again, this is going to sound wacky to anybody out there that's listening, but it was just incredibly healing and calming to go visit with the spirit who would, you know, the first spirit that I connected with is a mother bear, and she would really just like rub my back and say, it's going to be okay. You know, this is all going to be okay, and you're going to just slowly, you know, handle this. And anyway, so it was, I guess my point is that it can be a comforting practice in times of trouble. And as Deb was saying, life is like this. I mean, we're faced with crises that are just plunked in our lap. Sometimes it's just an unusual sense of not knowing something strange is happening and I'm being called to something different. And the practice of shamanism really helps you to see through these dark areas in your life, or dark spots. In another word for shamanism, the root of that is to see with the heart, or to see in the dark. Because a lot of these things are mysterious, what's going on in our lives. Something bigger is at play, and it helps us to walk through those things.
You know, and I think also what I would say with my own experience, and you know, and I've shared with you all about my husband's death, and which was and still is a huge crisis for me, is that I feel like all of my ears are open and I am receptive. And so I am receptive to the love and compassion. I am receptive to when I ask myself the question, what do I need to do to calm myself? What could calm me now? And so I am ready to sort of think outside of the box. And I'm wondering, you know, if that's a little bit what crisis, that we human beings sometimes seem to need a crisis in order to be willing to move out of our comfort zone. Deborah?
I think crises are one of the biggest gifts we can have.
Yes.
And I was thinking of a quote, and I can't remember who said it, but a crisis is an opportunity to either break down or break open. And it's a terrible thing to waste.
Oh, I love that.
I think that's a bumper sticker, actually.
But it's a good bumper sticker,
bumper
right? Yeah,
yeah,
crisis
yeah.
is a terrible thing to and that gets at. I think Deborah's offering us a lot of ways of seeing our world differently, because we usually live in fear of a crisis, right?
Yes.
Rather than saying, is there a gift here? Is there a lesson here? Is there something that this experience can give back to me, rather than just feel like it's taken everything from me? What a gift that is! What a gift that is to me right now. I think we have time for one more question, and that is, what would you offer to a friend confined to a wheelchair? Now, I like that question because it assumes somehow that if you have some kind of physical limitation, that maybe you are limited in what in the wellness that you can have, and that's not something I would believe. But
there's so much more to us than our physical self, and so I would seek those things that are more subtle. Matt Sanford has really led the way with that, the subtle energies, the ability to move into spirit and deeper into those levels. So yes, yoga is very appropriate for. There's movements that can happen in a wheelchair, but there's just so much of the philosophy and the discipline and the meditation that's available.
And I think that we're going to end on that because we're coming short on time now. And what a wonderful, wonderful conversation. And so, Mr. Norwegian Bachelor Farmer, you've heard some alternatives, but as Sarah said, actually, this is way back in your roots too. What did we learn tonight? Number one, we learned we have permission to be messy. Number two, embrace the crisis. It is actually a gift waiting for us to help us find out more of who we are and to reclaim that back. Thanks so much for joining the discussion this week. And don't forget to visit us on the web at speakyourmindonline.org, where you can find a schedule of our topics and resource links. And join us next week when we'll learn about living with dementia. I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps. Thanks for watching and good night.